schools or so to 8 venues. And in those 8 venues, so that would mean something like 1,000 or so students. So people are excited to come back. They want to, students are generally excited to get out of school in many cases. They'll meet other students. They'll meet mentors. They might meet someone like, I don't know, maybe an engineer that works in Kenya Power or Communication Authority, and just maybe get them to really start thinking, especially now that they are on their final year or almost the final year, get them just to start getting a line of sight from where they are today to where they could be potentially 20 years from now. If we could give more young people a line of sight from where they are today, you give them something more. You give them like a sense of vision, and we've seen how powerful this can be. And I know we are calling Mentorton today and saying we're focusing on high school students, but I think the greater call and the larger movement really is, can we get more people to support
and to give back
other people and to pay forward?
This being the 5th edition, right? It means that those who participated in the first edition are already past high school. Many of them are past college or they're about to graduate university. Can you tell us a difference? Can you tell that this guy actually went for mentorship?
Actually, one question that I've been asked consistently is, team, how can we measure this? And I think this year, probably not this year, the year before last year when I applied for Senate, we had so many people just reach out to say, team, please ignore the naysayers. You touched our lives. We love what you did with Mentorton. But this year, I think we have more than 10 mentees that are now returning to be mentors. They're like, team, you touched our lives. I nearly committed suicide. When Titus mentored me, a gentleman called Paul, I got an A-. I ended up going to Kenyatta University. I'm doing this. And to be honest, I'm a product of mentorship. I've told this story before. When I was in Chebara High School, where I was, there is a young girl called Penina that came to speak to us. And, we hadn't seen girls like her. In Morocco. Those days, she was wearing a trouser. She was thinking, she had just gotten first class honor. She was going to go to university. And Penina was just speaking about the dreams that she had in the future. She spoke about a world that was possible with education if we could focus. She told us the story of Ben Carson. But, inadvertently, she ended up telling us the story of what was possible for ourselves. And that year, for the first time, we sent the highest number of students to the university.
From Chebara High School.
I don't attribute it completely to Penina, but that connection was an accidental one. What I had been hoping we do with Mentorton is we design similar accidents. We get someone like Eric to speak to the next journalist, because that's part of the job that honestly we should be doing. And we've seen how this has changed generations. When they did a study of, say, companies in Argentina, Buenos Aires. A couple of years ago, there was no company that was existent. When they do a story today, when they did a story a couple of years ago, more than 200 companies are traced to 3 companies, because those founders had awesome successes. One of them sold for $700 million, another on $350 million. Then they took the money, instead of going to buy rental buildings and build rental houses and retire, the only thing they did is come back and become mentors and become investors for the next couple of companies. Today, we know Argentina and Buenos Aires, in that case, as a fintech app, as a technology app. We know Istanbul as the same. We know Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley can be just traced to 3 companies alone: Xerox, IBM. And why is that? Because a few of those people just decided that their life had to be much more than their own success alone. If you think about, say, a company like, say, YC. YC is a Y Combinator. It was begun by a gentleman with his wife called Paul Graham. And you know how many companies that have exited billions of dollars out of Y Combinator? You cannot believe it. And the only thing they were doing is that they had a little bit of more success, the two of them. They decided they're going to take their money, set up this fund called Y Combinator, and they will invest a number of companies. Every year they've been investing. I think the last couple of years they've invested more than 400 companies. So many of those companies have gone on to become billion-dollar exits for the country, and on and on and on. And I really think that the point that I'm trying to underscore here is that if we can rally ourselves to get more leaders and more entrepreneurs and more brands, and each of you and each one of us to give a little bit of ourselves, just maybe we might be able to catalyze a much bigger, and I mean that in a literal sense. Anyone that supported the president in the last couple of years has a chance. now in this government. Where were we? Some of us that didn't support him. Probably we didn't support him enough for us to be known to him. And therefore, I say, we should give ourselves. Give yourself to a leader. Give yourself to a company. Give yourself to a cause. Commit to something that is larger than what you do every day. But I'm asking you, hopefully, make one of the commitments that you could make to give your time and your experience and your expertise and your could be mental.
Do you think that's what's missing? Because if we talk about society being a total of units, right? So your unit being the individual, and that if you have a society that is not, punching at its weight, and the only reason is because you have individuals who are not punching at their individual weight, so they cannot come together, as then society, as communities. So would you think that that's what's missing? That we have, whether they be young people or older people, who then don't have that connector that you're talking about now, to open up the mind, to think a little bit different. We spoke this morning about a huge number, 600,000 students today who have not applied for placement in university or college. We don't know the reason why every single one of those 607,000 people have not. But suffice to say that we can infer that, there's lethargy at some point. There's the feeling that I didn't do enough to get to the place where I can be in university, so I'm not even going to bother to go through that process. So is there something that needs to be unlocked in the minds of people to say then, how then can we actually contribute towards society, towards community? And maybe one of the keys to that is to having somebody else who has then speak to that space.
I mean, I think you are right on the money. I think that the greatest opportunity, today we have nearly 10 million young people today in Kenya that are underemployed or unemployed. I think the greatest window for them is have them volunteer somewhat. But for them to volunteer, you will need people. For them to volunteer and become apprentices, you will need people. You will need Andu that can say, hey, listen, young lady, I'm going to hold your hand. The only thing I want you to do is to give me 100%. If you give me 100%, in another 6 or 7 months, you will be able to do 20-30% of what I do today, and that's enough for you to get started on your job. So I totally, absolutely agree. I think that if we completely relied on governments alone to solve, in fact, it's been proven already in many countries around the world, governments barely on their own make a difference. What really makes a difference in many cases is entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs it's in the broader sense. Entrepreneurs, whether it's mission entrepreneurs, it's individuals that are taking risk in places where it's unlikely for them to succeed. Government does play a significant role, but you still need all these changes. And in many cases, actually, some of the best ways for governments to move requires changes. It requires people that are like, I'm going to change 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And hopefully, you hope that those people that have positions of power have also the empirical data supporting the kind of changes that they are pushing. And I don't know, ALS Ice Bucket Challenge began very simple. People pouring ice on themselves and saying, we're going to do something about that condition called ALS. They raised more than $200 million. Whether it's Giving Tuesday, whether it's the Giving Pledge, whether it's the entrepreneur saying, you know what, we're going to commit a small portion of our assets. They estimated that if everyone were to agree to giving out 2% of their wealth, we would raise about $10 trillion to do, and you can imagine how much good that can do. But sometimes when you ask people for money, you blind them completely from the opportunity. I think the real opportunity is to ask people to give of themselves. And the easiest thing to give is your gift.
Tim, why do you've said something that I find interesting. Why do you think people suddenly react interestingly when they're asked for money?
Because I think it's I think part of it is people that generally have money are protective of themselves. So as a rule of thumb, I raised capital for our company, more than maybe 1.5 billion over the last couple of years. When I began initially, I would ask people for money, and people will give me advice. So I now really believe that thing, that if you really want money, you have to ask for advice, and if you want advice, you have to ask for money. Because, and then the money really follows the opportunity. So sometimes I think the greatest thing that I could potentially do if I was a young entrepreneur or a young aspiring leader is, not to put money ahead, but to put something more important ahead. And even just getting that message across to young people is very difficult. It's very difficult, and that's really what I'm hoping, that some young people may relate to, they might relate to someone, and I'm hoping that if they can listen to, say, Dr. Raul Fuquero, who is my partner in QuestWorks, or they can listen to a student that is not a student but a technology engineer at Microsoft, whoever it is that they can listen to. When they interviewed a number of engineers a couple of days ago in Microsoft in the US, they asked them who their role model is. They mentioned Juliana Rotich. Okay,
right.
Because of our work in technology, in advocacy. So if we can get more young people to believe that if we can get more people to potentially tell their stories in a more imaginative way, in a more creative way, just maybe we might get a few less young people not applying to university. I don't think it's purely. I think 500,000 young people may not apply for university, but it cannot just be that they don't feel right. Part of the other reason is that they don't see how that can be a tool for their positive transformation.
They don't see why.
They don't see the reason why, and that's really dangerous, because and you can't blame them. Part of it is an opportunity question, but part of it is also mindset, and part of it is mindset. But part of it is also believing that they themselves can become change agents. Because if we just kept waiting for someone else to do something, nothing will ever happen.
Tim, local mentors. How do you determine and decide who it is who would qualify as a local mentor? Somebody within the locality of Elgeyo Marakwet.
So it will be, I don't know, a student that has potentially gone to university or didn't go to university, that is doing reasonably well, a young business person, maybe an athlete, because what we really want is not just academic success, it's human excellence, it's resilience, it's something good about you that someone else can say, you know what, just maybe. And we don't aim for perfection, because if we insisted that generosity has to be perfect, we miss the point. Mr. Beast is successful, everyone criticizes him all over the world, but he catalyzes so many millions of fans on a new wave of generosity, on a new way of kindness. So all I'm really saying is, just maybe, everyone can be a little Mr. Beast.
But do you vet?
We vet, of course. We vet.
Because that's like the other example City had given. Somebody who everybody knows this guy, and then he leaves and comes back driving a huge car. And you really can't put the connection between what he was doing and what he may be doing now and how he's acquired the vehicle. But then they're coming back to the community and saying, they could be coming to say, so believe in yourself.
So we vet. But remember, if we're going to have, we probably got like 200 mentors now, we might get it wrong on 1 or 2 or 3. But really broadly, if we are net positive experience, it will be good. It will be good for the mentors, and it will be good for the students as well.
In an earlier time, before this information age, that story was very easy to tell. If you're talking about post-independence and just immediately pre, let's say talk post, the benefit of going to school was obvious.
That's true.
Because somebody who went to school got a job. When they got a job, they could buy a car. Let's start with bicycle, just so that we progress. Okay? And then when the house was not the issue, the roofing. It was corrugated iron sheets.
You moved in.
And somebody who had corrugated iron sheets on their parents' home, it was the best advertisement for education. If so and so went to school and this is what they can do, I think this education is a good thing.
That's true.
What is the thing that we can now look at, and we're talking about young people can look at and say, they look at that example and say, this is a good thing. It is worth my while to bother with education. You see, the narrative of education for work That has to change.
That's true. Agreed. Absolutely. When I asked for votes in Elgeyo, I told the people of Elgeyo Marakwet County, this will be the first job I get. Since I finished college, I worked for 3 years. I became unemployed. And then we began the company that is QuestWorks. And on my own with a small team, we began something. It was small initially, 4 people, and then 9 people, and then subsequently 100 people, and then I think 200 at its peak direct employees. And then indirect, it can easily be another 200, 300. And I would ask them that, so I understand what it is like to begin something, to build something from nothing to something.
Yes.
And so if you give me this job, I'll take it seriously because actually, I understand how valuable it is to go out there and create jobs, and I will do my level best. If I become your senator, to be a champion of more folks that are we're gonna use regulation as a basis to try to create more opportunity. I wrote books for high school students, so I agree with you. But to be honest, if we can get it right, 80% of the time, chance we will be okay. Because right now, what is happening is that the stories that gain more prevalence generally are negative stories.
Yep.
And so to the extent that you can just get exciting positive stories being told, with this age of artificial intelligence and internet and technology, you are better off because every single day, what makes it to the news is not like this morning show. What makes it to the news is what is crazy that has happened in the last 4 hours, or what has happened in the last 4 days. But that's not necessarily the right story. And everyone knows right now, and I know I'm in a media station and I should be careful what I say now, otherwise you don't receive me next time. But media generally and news generally is bad news because that's generally what the human brain will absorb. And so over time, and it's already clear, over time, the story that needs to be told is rarely the one that makes it to the news. You will never know the small young man that began a couple of, 20 years ago, and spinned off, let's say, retirement benefits authority, and today is the CEO called Charles. You'll never know that story. No one will tell you about the only Rendile that has become a CEO. No one will tell you about, the journalist that is running Communication Authority with Universal Service Fund. No one will tell you those stories. The stories that will make it today is floods, it's corruption, it's fraud. And so I'm really just hoping that by getting and catalyzing more folks to tell good and exciting stories to young people, we are doing 2 things simultaneously. We are helping those young people to have a sense of self-belief. We're telling good stories that can help uplift the consciousness of the country, because there is actually something called talking down to yourself. If you tell negative stories continuously, you really suppress the potential of what is possible in the country, what is possible for young people. And we are seeing that every day. Even if, forget media, even just social media alone just tells bad stories every single day, which is why I gloss over the bad things that are happening to young people today and speak more to what those young people could potentially do with us, what those young people could potentially achieve with the help that we potentially can give them.
In your organization, do you have a space for young people to contribute to informing and advising you as to what it is that young people actually want and desire?
I love that. When we wrote this book, I got a full class of, I think, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4 students to give us feedback when we wrote Unstoppable. The same for different millionaires. Because we also realize when we speak to, say, high school students, you must be cognizant of the fact that we are very different now. I'm much more different than they are. So we're like, okay, give us feedback. What is it that worries you? What concerns you? What are your biggest fears? And then we use that to try to see if we can incorporate. Now in Mentorton, we have, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds or 21-year-olds that are just beginning college, or they are in second year, third year. And they understand. They have a certain sense of the psyche of Gen Z, which is different than, say, a millennial or baby boomers, as it were. So we don't pretend to know everything, but what we also now do is we speak to the principal, we speak to the guiding and counseling teachers and say, listen, what are the biggest challenges that you face? And then using that information, we sort of see how we can curate the mentorship and the storytelling and maybe even the group discussions when we end up doing. So, but I'm hoping, I mean, we are still a startup as it were, because we've been doing this as a volunteer effort, but I'm really, really excited with the level of support that we're getting now, with having standard group, having KT and having Spice as a media partner. And you're not, like you're giving us partnership now for free. You're really saying you want media to be a force of good. So I know I'm lecturing here, but the truth is you've given us this platform to say we want to be part of that story team. We like what Mentorton is doing, and we want Standard Group largely and as a group to really be part of that change agent. Because just maybe it might be possible for us to make this national. And if we make this national, if we have 3 million, 4 million people that are working in Kenya, and they each go out to just do their own variations of Mentorton. They each go to tell their own stories. They each commit to give us 42 hours in a year. Or they each commit to adopt a school, whether it's their primary school or their secondary school. I mean, the level of change we can achieve, and actually the level of happiness and meaning we can each achieve is amazing. Every time we come back from Mentorton, the biggest beneficiaries typically are the mentors and the speakers. And the brands, they're like, oh my goodness, Nairobi can make you selfish. You're always running around. You're like constantly worried. But when you go and meet people that truly, genuinely need, you have perspective. And that perspective just makes you happy. Which is why we typically want it to be like 42 hours. Because then there's a road trip, we have dinner, which is fully sponsored by our partners, and then we do mentorship for day one, mentorship for day two, and then on the last day, we do tree planting and all those things. And then on the last day, we will have Nyama Choma, we will have tourism, we will promote the county tourism. So imagine we go to Marsabit, we'll have fantastic photos out of Marsabit, or Baringo, or Elgeyo Marakwet County. Then we promote tourism, we promote something local about the people, something cultural about the people. But more importantly, we've now built this experience that says, you know what, giving back can be fun, can be exciting, and can be sexy. If we can get to the place where people think kindness is cool and sexy, man, you've just changed the world, because that makes people happy, gives them meaning, but more importantly, changes lives.
Sure.
But the problem is today, it's not.
So I guess I kind of bleed into what my question was going to be, and I think you just started off on that, is that then what potential then does this have to be able to achieve in the country when we then talk about tapping into the mind, essentially mind over matter kind of thing. So what potential then does there exist for real change to come about?
So I think the greatest opportunity, honestly, is that you will have, CEOs, you'll have entrepreneurs, you'll have media professionals, you'll have people from different professions that have, 20, 30 years of distilled experience that young people could potentially tap. And that is just powerful, because you can never really buy that. You can never really buy the advice, Eric, you can give to a young person to short circuit from where they are when they're thinking about college to where they could get to you. You can't. You just can't. There are lessons that are never written about how to potentially advance. And I think the biggest beneficiaries end up becoming the people that are takers. They did a research on who wins. Is it givers, takers, or is it matchers? So givers are people that just almost automatically, when they meet you, they are like, what can I do for you? And matchers are like, what can I do, but I still get something? And takers are like, what can I get? Of course, the people that want the most, whether it's engineers, salespeople, were the givers. But the people that also lost the most were the givers, because they were taken advantage of.
Right.
And so the question ends up becoming, how then can givers do better? And so what people do is that they say, so they ask the three questions: why, when, and to whom. Why? Because you really, really want to make sure that you have a really strong why as to why you're doing what you're doing. If you are forced to do something, you wouldn't want it. But if you're also serving people that you want to serve, like young students, you are even more energized. And so I think the potential is that, we could potentially get, 2 million people giving their time, 42 hours a year, and more than 2 million, 10 million young people potentially getting transformed.
So when is the next Mentorton?
So we will have the first Mentorton in Elgeyo end of this month. So 29th, 30th and 31st. But in June, we will have potentially Marsabit and West Pokot, and in July, Baringo. The Elgeyo one begins in 28 with stakeholder session